Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Revolution of Being. So, this is a part two from our last episode where we were talking about our experiences with psilocybin. So, today we want to talk more about what got us to the decision point of utilizing the medicine, but also we're going to dive into more details on proper pre integration support during the journey and then post integration, which we addressed a little bit, but we're going to just give some more details on. So, what brings a person to the medicine is very individual to every single person. Okay. I've listened to podcasts where it was someone experimenting at 18 at a concert. Others, have had more of a journey like we've had. And there's at the whole spectrum in between of that, of course. And so, my journey into the medicine really started kind of 2020, that was my spiritual awakening. And, that was the time where I had my dark night of the soul. I had been over consuming alcohol, decided to quit, and really kind of started to face myself and do really deep inner work. And it was insane because when that happened, it felt like my world was crashing down, right? I had just given up one thing and really opened myself up to, hey, here's all the shit you've not addressed for 35 years of your life, since you were born, essentially. And so I really was doing some profoundly deep inner work during that time. And, as I mentioned last episode, I think it was about 2021 where I was like, I want to try plant medicine. And it wasn't my time. The medicine was very much like, no, bitch, you got some work to do. You're bypassing all the work. And what do I mean by work? It was, what my triggers are, the undealt with emotions, not feeling safe in my body, not feeling confident to be myself or be seen, all these different things that I just never dealt with, right? Because I would have a trigger happen and I'd be like, oh, let's just have some wine. It's been a stressful day. Let's have some wine. And there's so much toxic mommy culture out there. Mom's had a hard day, have some wine. And I bought into all that, when I was working a very stressful, emotionally stressful job as a hospice nurse. And I love hospice so much, but there's a heavy emotional toll that comes with that work. And so, kind of what really was the catalyst to my medicine journey. So, I've done a ton of self development. I've worked with therapists years ago. I have, meditated. I've done hypnotherapy. I've done yoga, nutrition, exercise, everything you could probably label or name, I've done. And what really got me to the point of the medicine was, first of all, I had a ton of synchronicities. So, meaning I was meeting people that were doing the medicine or knew people that supported individuals on journeys, here in little old Minnesota. Usually you think of people often like the Amazon or in Peru, right? But it was here, I was seeing people. Conversations were coming up a lot more with psilocybin. A lot of podcasts I was listening to, and even my clients were asking more about it. And it was kind of like, knock, knock, hey, pay attention. We're ready for you. And, the biggest catalyst on top of like the healing, I lost my dad at a young age. I had eating disorders. I've had a lot of stuff that I've dealt with, um, that I've been working through. The bigger one was my relationship with my husband was really the catalyst. Him and I met when we were 15. We were high school sweethearts. We've had an interesting journey. And there was a lot of deep healing that had to happen. And he is the most kind, beautiful soul I've ever met. And just, he's my person and I have no doubt about that. But there were some things that happened that were really traumatic, where I had developed some PTSD and I won't go into all the details here, but it was things that, it was like poison in our relationship. And now he was doing everything he could to be a supportive partner to help navigate what we had been through. And, many apologies had happened along the way. And no, there wasn't infidelity. Okay. So that probably sounds like what I'm alluding to. That wasn't it. But um, there were he had done everything he could. And I knew that this hurt and the anger inside of me based on our life experiences was eating me alive and it was eroding our relationship. And, he had heard me saying, I'm going to try this and it's going to make us better. I'm going to do this and it's going to make us better. I was desperately seeking true healing, because energetically, how it felt to me was energetically when I didn't feel safe to be intimate, meaning even just hug, I felt so like I had like guarded myself so severely from past hurt that I couldn't be open with him. And I know all the mindset stuff. I know all the things. And there was so much shame that came with that, right? Because I knew all the things to do and nothing was helping. I was praying, I was surrendering it, I was asking God, the universe for help. And I was not, nothing was budging. Um, and that's not to say the power of prayer is not valuable, right? For me, I needed more support. And so that was really, a big reason I was like, I feel like this is what I need. It's almost like I liken the medicine to, and this isn't the best analogy, but like an atomic bomb. It like blew doors open to the insides of me so that it could expose the true hurt, the pain, see it from a way that was dissociated, and heal. Now, it's interesting because, as I mentioned in the last episode, my journey was not about our relationship at all. And that was one of the intentions, was healing there. But because of how the medicine worked, I could see from such a high level that none of the problems really mattered, right? Like they did, but it was like an indirect healing that occurred in that. And, my husband and I did a journey together, and it was so profoundly powerful that we were able to do just incredible amounts of healing. And so, that was a big reason why I felt very drawn to the medicine, was like, there are parts of me that I know need to heal so that I can be, so I can feel safe. I can feel authentic. I can remove the things that are no longer me. You and I talk a lot about the fact that we're not broken. And I believe that life has happened, but there was shrapnel, in me, and it wasn't letting me be my most authentic self. And it wasn't letting me be the most authentic mother, partner, friend, because I had some of that energetic hangover still stuck in my sphere. And so that was really, what got me into the medicine, of course, with curiosity and spiritual growth. But I was seeking really deep healing. And, man, the difference it's made. I mean, for 10 to 15 years working on this actively, and it was like in one experience that lifted, and it's not to say it went away. I had to work to it, and that's part of what we'll talk about. But, that's the pre and post integration work that I had to do, right? So that was really, kind of what got me to that. And as I've, removed these layers of trauma and healing, um, I'm exposing deeper things. I'm exposing stuff that's even, we are like these layers of an onion. So you expose one layer, there's other stuff beneath that comes out, but it is intense. It's very intense. But you understand how to handle it better. You understand what it is that these things are coming up to be exposed. So you really just like the laughing and crying, right? As these things were coming up, it was alchemizing it. As I was crying, as I was giggling, as I was whatever, I was alchemizing all these stagnant emotions that were like a shaken up pop bottle that were just under pressure for so many years. And so, for me, it was transformational in my relationship and my life, but also really kind of fast tracked a lot of my spiritual growth that I've had.
Right, right. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Ange. This is really vulnerable stuff, but I think that people need to hear it, and they need to hear it more from people that they might look at on the surface and see one image. You and I were talking about this the other day, that things are not really as they seem. Everything is just this kind of illusion through our own perception. So we perceive something, we make up a story about it. And the truth is that I think every human being that's alive is going to carry struggles with them. And it's up to them along the journey whether or not they're willing to go through these processes, these experiences, to let them go. um, my journey to the medicine, was different than yours, although we have some similarities. Um, going really far back in time, I, and this is a hard thing for me to talk about. I'm just going to be really open about this because I still carry the dissonance with it in some ways. But as a child, there was, of course, good moments in my life, but I had a lot of hard moments. And I could make this logical as a child. So I still do this as an adult. And this is part of the work with medicine that I do. I understand why. That is a curse and a blessing. This is part of what had to bring me to the medicine. I understand why things were hard. I understand generational trauma. I understand that hurt people, so to speak. So I have a deep compassion for the people that I would say was very unintentional hurt that created some really significant there's no other word for it, trauma in my life. And it came as a young child, but it came also as a child knowing why it was happening. So that is the first thing that gets really deep. That gets really deep in a person. So when you're faced with different types of trauma, from physical to emotional to psychological, it changes you as you grow up. And that was kind of my story. I I still hold probably a significant amount of emotional trauma in my body that manifests physically, but it changes every decision you make. So I grew up with that. I hit adolescence, physically challenged with my health. And I would say I really had my awakening after my youngest was born. I would say that was my aha, there's something happening here. That's when I started making choices that were different, which rewired my brain. But the way it works is that you're just at layer one. And so for the last how many years, I have been hit with many opportunities to level myself up from I had heavy metal poisoning acutely, which created years of undoing that. Um, Ended a marriage after a very long time, which was a very sad event. Had other things that happened in between there, and ultimately, I started my own career about 5 or 6 years ago or so, and have been just trying to do everything on my own while healing, while being in therapy, working on myself, building a business, working with my clients, always trying to get to that next layer, that next layer, that next layer. And in the midst of it all, as the universe tends to do for us, I had a massive separation from my own family. And it's in the greater good for all involved. But what a painful event to just kind of have everybody kind of suddenly die. It's a very different thing to grieve people that are still very much alive, right? And that's in no way, I think, saying it would be easier if they were dead. It's a different kind of grief. I would argue that it's a harder grief to just be outside of that and still have them around. So I've been dealing with that for the last couple of years. And that was the catalyst for the next stage of my growth. That was it. These events are not light. They're real deep, they're real heavy, they're grueling, they're really hard, and this is really a vulnerable place. But I think those things had to happen for me to go to this next layer, which is very deep. So that layer, though, was very hard to do through talk therapy. Uh, this is a physical, visceral response to my life. And I know it's there, but it's just sort of out of my control on a physical level. And so I knew that this was something very, very deep and something I had to allow myself to fully surrender into. And I could not figure out how to surrender to it in my everyday conscious life. And I've done a lot of meditation, and boy, I've gotten to go to some pretty cool places in meditation. But at the end of the day, once plant medicine was introduced into this scenario that's playing out, I just knew. I knew that this was for me. This is where I get to go to that next level. and I get to be my own best healer
Right.
and have the support of a great person in my life that's able to help me navigate that without judgment. A lot of the stuff we talk about, there's significant shame around it. So if and I know there's so many victims of abuse. My goodness, our world, talk about, abuse. This is headlines. We're recording this during the Diddy times, right? So we are hearing about a lot of different abuse, and abuse has a very wide swath of conversation points. And there's a lot of different, I would say there's a spectrum of, I didn't heal myself and I didn't know I was being abusive, to all the way to I was choosing to abuse you. There's this swath, and I really want to be transparent in that, because I know that my family and my friends will watch this too, and there is a wide swath of definitions. But
Well, and I
at
want to
the end,
interject there
yeah,
because it's interpretation as well, right? So we've talked about this a lot is, a parent could intend best intentions for their child, and that child can interpret that as I was abandoned. They didn't love me. I'm not pretty enough. I have to do blah, blah, blah to achieve this. So we're not in any way shaming our family. Now, there were obviously things that happened, I think, in both of our lives that one would look at and be like, yeah, that's kind of messed up for sure. And everything comes down to perception. And that really is how trauma can happen. And that goes into, looking at, you have a family, dad's an alcoholic, and they have twins. One becomes a raging alcoholic. One is like, nope, not doing that.
yep,
It's all based on what you internalize and receive from that. And I just want to say, as a child, we don't have a choice. Our beautiful little brains are like sponges, just taking in everything around us. So we don't
mhm,
even have, as children, the ability to say, Mom didn't mean to do that. That's not what she meant. Or Dad didn't mean that. We just make up, make meaning out of the events. We're trying to, it's a survival mechanism. And so, even the best intended parents, friends, partners can still create trauma in another person.
yeah,
And um, so it comes down to a lot of that. But, as you were saying too, within trauma, it does get stored in our bodies. There are books written on this. It Didn't Start With You is a fantastic book if you haven't read it. And The Body Keeps the Score is more sciency, right? Um, but talks about how generational trauma in our cells carries down.
yeah,
So not only are we dealing with our own bullshit, we're dealing with our parents and their parents and their parents' parents. And, that's heavy lifting. And those of us that are doing the work, like I'm sure most of our listeners are, it is not for the faint of heart. And it's not that our parents or others aren't trying. They didn't have necessarily the resources, the insights, the tools that we're coming to understand, or maybe just we're not at the evolutionary level to kind of begin to understand you can be a victor and not a victim. So sorry to interject, but I just wanted to acknowledge, that there's different scales of trauma and it comes down to perception. But again, when we're little, we don't get to decide what we perceive. As we're older, we can, and that's the power we have.
yes. Thank you for that, because that's a really good way to. You're really good at putting that all together, in ways that I can't really express. But what you said is true, and it's that kind of deeper stuff. It's the stuff that happens to us. You and I talk about it. We have children, and
Mhm.
you and I can self-reflect and be like, "Oh my gosh, what did we just do?" Right? We just did something. And I was having a really great conversation with my youngest child last night. He's 19, so he's not little, but he's got a really high level thought process, and he's emotionally very intelligent, and he's really good at self-reflection. And he was just talking about, and I know he won't care that I say this, I don't think, about how he's very self-conscious of his own voice and of his cadence when he speaks and all these little things. And we were having this conversation like, well, number one, I think everybody is. on some levels. So that's kind of normal. But number two, the thing I pointed out is when he was young, somebody probably said something, and they probably said it because he was a chatty kid, and they were probably like, Jesus, do you ever be quiet? Kind of a thing. Or he felt unheard in some way and perceived that as I'm annoying, I'm whatever. And he fully acknowledges that like this has become his belief system. And even if it's not wrong, it creates dissonance. But this is the kind of stuff that gets lodged really, really deep.
Yes.
And that's where the medicine can get you to. Because, like you said, there's this pulling away from, you're zooming out. So, if
Mhm.
you think of like Earth and you think about where your feet are planted right now, what the medicine kind of does is it's kind of like Google Earth. And it's like, hey, there's Angie, or hey, there's Jessica. And it goes, zzz, and it zooms you way out. And it gives you this different understanding of your role in the world and your significance, and how all these little things are just little blips in the radar. And the further out you get to the bigger picture, the less impactful they are to the whole. And that is sort of what the medicine does.
Well, and I'll add too, so yes, and every dose is going to offer a different experience. So I just wanna, like, I wanna, rewind a hot second and say, yes, at the heroic doses that we first experienced,
Yeah.
it's so interesting because, your first dose was similar-ish to a dose you did recently. Very
Mhm.
different experiences. One was very dissociated, one you were in it. And the medicine will give you what you need. My experience as well was very dissociative. For my first one, I was very much eagle eye, everything. I was a part of all that is. My more recent experiences was very body. Like I was in the body and I was very uncomfortable and I was processing stuff. I didn't even know what the hell was going on. But I was in it and I was like crawling out of my skin. And there's a purpose in that, right? And there was healing in that. And so some people will say, well, psilocybin's not a dissociative, that's more ketamine therapy or other things. It can be, and again, the medicine will give you what it needs to. I think, for us both, the medicine, was like, hey, we're going to show you how gentle we are. We're going to
Yeah.
show you how gentle you are. And then it was like, and now that you know, we're going to go deeper and we're going to get in there and we're going to make you feel and process, sit and the medicine has its own consciousness. It has its own intelligence. So if you perceive an ass kicking, you need it, you know?
And I want to talk about that for just a minute because I think this is a really good point. I think people need to hear it. I love that you brought this up because, yes, I've had the very zoomed out experience. Like we are all one. This is all, but you're right. The last time I did this, I did not have that experience. Um, and I think people could say, well, that was a bad trip. But here's the thing, it was the most profound one of all. And the reason why, here's what I learned, and this is a really important takeaway on healing. My journey was at the higher dose. I was physically uncomfortable. My body was very heavy. My first time, there was no sensation of hunger. There was no sensation of discomfort. I really felt like I was part of everything. This one, it was like, nope, you're going to lay here with a headache. You're going to lay here agitated, a bit restless. You're not even going to really see anything. We're not even going to give you, like, here's some brown for you. And here's a triangle, maybe, right? There was nothing even to ooh and ah over. And I kind of sat with that for a while going, well, does it not work for me anymore? But it was so just kind of like an itchy sweater that I couldn't even really think about getting up and getting an ibuprofen, for instance. It was a really different thing. And I was hungry. I'm like, I shouldn't be hungry. There's nothing that makes sense here. And it was in that I finally realized what I had to do, and it was surrender. That was my loop. That was my nausea. That was my thing. It gave me this headache. And it gave me the headache and said, this is a physical representation. This is literally what it said to me. This is a physical representation that you are going to feel the sensation of that represents the pain that's lodged inside of you. And you, Jessica, have been trying to cut it off like a diseased limb and abandon that part of yourself. The little girl, you're abandoning her over and over again by cursing it, by wishing it was gone, by screaming at it, by ignoring it, by putting on a mask, by doing, and it was just this knowing. And I laid there with it. And I found myself going, I'm not going to leave you. As I was referring to the headache, to the pain, to the little girl, nope, I'm going to sit here with you. I'm going to sit here with you and feel it and allow it. So, what came out of that bad trip was a new understanding that I've been approaching my healing with the intention of cutting it off and getting rid of the pain instead of embracing it, integrating it because there's beauty in it. There's lessons in it. And that little girl needs to be brought back in and she needs to be held and comforted. And you were outside, I recall looking at the pretty lights because things are very kind of vivid, right? And you had asked me to go out and I knew that I needed to stay and I did. And once I got through whatever that process was, I remember it said, now what would you do with that pain that you're going to love and accept and stay with forever? What would you do with it? And in my mind, I heard, show it something beautiful. And kind of with that, the headache dissipated. My legs started working again. And I went outside and I just remember sitting with you and just kind of being in awe. It was a beautiful thing. And it was so profound, but I think people could argue that it was a bad trip. And you know what else it did? It definitely, and see, I could cry. It definitely made me not want to jump back into it right away.
And
It's
that's
not a
the
good
thing, this is I just wanna say, and we'll jump into the what to do pre and during and post. I think you're kinda getting a sense of this already, but this is nothing that we're like, "Hey, I wanna do this every weekend." I mean, there are people that do, and kudos. This,
yeah.
with deep intention, this is very ceremonial. This is really something, on the other side of your journey, you really want to take deep time to be integrating all the lessons that are coming through and not just jumping into journey after journey after journey. And, some people will microdose the medicine. Some people will do, bigger doses for more of an
Mhm.
experience. They all have a place. But it's not addictive. You can get addicted, it's arguable that you could get addicted to the first journey that we had. That was so
Mhm.
profound, trying to chase that. But
But it was exhausting.
it is very exhausting, and you have to realize you can't trick the medicine. Like, it's not gonna give you what you demand, it's gonna give you what you need.
Yes.
And so let's just dial back a little bit. We talked about how we got to the medicine. So, I just wanna be abundantly clear, we're gonna be launching some cool stuff in the spring and then the next year on all of this, because this work is not for the novice, okay? And people do jump into it who, are going in it soon and maybe haven't done the work, and that's okay. There's no wrong way. But if you really want to get the most out of this experience, the pre-work is really, are you already doing some inner child healing? Are you working with someone, whether it's someone like me who does that for, my profession, or a therapist, or someone that's helping you understand the parts of you that are coming up, the triggers that you have, the really introspective work, right? And I don't mean a month of this. I mean, for you and I, this has been years of work and intentional, and it happens in real time. Okay, someone says something, I'm triggered. Oof. Okay, what about me feels defensive right now? What about me feels unheard? Okay, it's a ton of self reflection. What about me? Feels like I'm not valuable enough. Like, you're constantly doing that work. So it's also, you can't rush the process because you're going to be getting stuff that comes up beforehand. So if you're going to work with the medicine, okay, you have maybe a coach you're working with, or you and a trusted friend are going to do this. In the weeks leading up to it, start journaling your intentions. Okay, so start writing out what you'd like to receive. Maybe one or two, maybe it's peace. Maybe I want to have a spiritual opening. I want to understand my purpose. I want to heal this aspect. So get
Mhm.
really clear on that and journal every day. Journal your thoughts that are coming up because you might start to notice triggers. The medicine, I swear, works before you take it. So you're going to have triggers and things surrounding your intention begin to come up, and it's coming up to be healed. So, that's a part of it, is setting your intention. So you and I, did kind of a lighter diet the week leading up to the medicine journey, where we had, more fresh fruits and vegetables. The day of, we did fast. We had a light smoothie in the morning, had our medicine journey in the evening. So we were fasted for probably a good 10 hours. Part of that is that it reduces the nausea. You don't really have a lot of stuff in your belly. And a lot of people find that it helps their journey be more pure. You're more tapped in. So fasting is also something we talk about. I've done it fasted. I've done it where I, ate 4 hours earlier. It's hard to know, if there was a big difference, because it's also the medicine. Every time can be different. So that's a really big part of it as well. But then on the day, so is there anything else, like just in the days leading up to that, intention setting? We'll talk about the day of as far as like the actual setting
I
and
think,
people.
yeah, the biggest thing that keeps popping in my head as you're talking is we should really mention that if you're on medications, you really have to do some homework or find somebody who knows, because there are some contradictions. SSRIs, antidepressants, that kind of thing, which are pretty common in our world. You want to be really aware of that. And that's where you and I, we cannot give medical advice. I don't even think we can speak on it on a level where you should take our, like, that's what they said.
Yeah.
This is something you'll have to understand for yourself.
Yeah.
Um, because I know that there was like a very light pharmaceutical that I was on, and I don't think there was any contradiction, but I gave it up a few days prior. I just did that to make sure I didn't have anything. You had mentioned the diet. You and I have approached it a little bit differently and sort of the same at times. My first hero's journey, I I really just I was very strict. I wanted to ensure that nothing interfered. I was like, whatever I can do to be supportive in this process. Um, I didn't eat meat for a week. I didn't have grains for many days. I didn't have coffee for many days. I stopped taking this low dose medication that I was on. I did all this stuff, and then I had just like fruit and water in a shake form in the morning the day of, and then had a journey very late in the day later, and I had a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
I want to say my journey started with like a lemon tech, so I may have come up kind of fast. So just knowing that like citrus, like lemon, can make things go up faster. We do teas. So I just wanted to kind of say that we've done it a few different ways, and I've done it more like you too. But yeah, what we're discovering is that every time is going to have its own distinct fingerprint.
Correct. And, the medicine, so if you're unsure, talk to your physician, I know some people are a little bit leery to bring this up, but your doctor doesn't care. Like, they would rather have you be safe. They may not know, so you might have to do your own research. We're gonna have some, PDFs and, like, downloadables, on our site available for, like, reference forms. But again, when it comes to medicine, there are some things to be mindful of, as you said. If you're on an SSRI, you do need to work with your therapist, your psychiatrist, your doctor to either wean down off of that, so you're off it at least a month before doing the medicine, or maybe this isn't the thing that you need to do if you're very dependent on utilizing that. I will argue it is a little bit of a short-term pain for a long-term gain. As somebody who used to be on an SSRI, I have not been for a long time, and there's so much placebo with that, and I'm not saying it doesn't help, but if you can handle weaning off safely, right? If it's safe for you, it could be profoundly transformational to consider working with the medicine. But again, use your discernment. This is not medical advice. Do not come back and say Angie and Jess said. Use
Right.
your own discernment. Um, and again, if you're working with an integration coach, they will be educating you on contraindications, on things, but also should be saying, talk with your provider. Again, these are guidelines. They are not to be taken, and the reason for the SSRI is, in part, some of the psychedelics can cause serotonin syndrome. If you have a boost of serotonin and you're taking a serotonin reuptake inhibitor, you can have too much serotonin, which can cause serotonin syndrome, which could be dangerous.
Mhm.
The more kind of mild interaction or thing you would see is that the medicine just doesn't work as well. It's competing with the serotonin too. So there's a couple reasons why I just wouldn't mess with it. But again, there's a ton of resources online that you can find that will say, be careful with these medications. Also, if you're someone who's prone to psychosis, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or family history, be careful. This could, in some cases, set off problems for people. If you have heart disease or diabetes, there's a few medical indications you'd want to be mindful of. So, if you have any health things, do research, because you don't want to mess in territories that you don't um, quite know what you're doing. And you don't want to find yourself in a situation that's not super great. So, as far as the day of, as we mentioned, we fasted. I've done it fasting and not fasting, but setting an intention and who you're around, music, those are all so important. So,
Mhm.
you and I did a lot of clearing work. So we had our Palo Santo, we had our sage, we cleared the energy around, and we set intentions for really eliminating any influences or yucky energy that could interfere. Because when you're tapping into that medicine, you're opening yourself up. And, I think you and I are pretty badass spiritual people and very well protected. However, like you don't want interference. You don't want anything coming in that you wouldn't welcome into your door.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, as we mentioned, we like to do tea. We throw a little ginger in there. There's plenty of recipes online on how to create psilocybin tea, and it's really a gentle way to receive it. By eating the medicine, it can cause a lot of stomach upset. So it's just not
Mhm.
something that we prefer to do. Plus, if you're taking a hero's dose, that's a fuck ton of mushrooms to eat. And it's not
Yeah.
pleasant. It's super gross. So when you make a tea, it's much gentler.
Mhm.
And, there are things, like lemon teching, where you can add some citrus. It can basically bring the onset quicker, but it also wears off faster.
Mhm.
Um, we like to start with meditation. We have very intentional, gentle, kind of nature grounding music. There's a lot of cool playlists on Spotify and YouTube that are very gentle music. Now, if you find yourself in a bad trip, consider changing the music, right?
Mhm.
Like, the music can really alter or get up and move around and move the energy through you. Um, and, as the have some water available, have some fruit. You might get a little dry, so have some fruit or something if you'd like. You're probably not going to be super hungry, but as the
Mhm.
medicine wears off, you'll feel your appetite kicking in. We always like pizza. We literally say we'll trip for pizza, like, because it's just a lovely after snack.
Yeah.
And when you're fasted all day, you do kind of want some calories to go in your body. What else, Jess? I know there's so many things we could talk about
Mhm.
during the journey.
Yeah, I think my first time, what was really helpful, especially just not really knowing exactly what to expect. The nausea is kind of an interesting thing. And so, number one, ginger tea on hand, like if you have a thermos or anything to have around, is really soothing. Number two, what you and I have both learned is that we can curb the body through breath work. So being prepared to just have that knowledge, like if your body starts to really integrate and you're feeling that nausea, that's always a sign for me to surrender more. And I do that through deep breath in, slow exhale. And I will even just ask, like, what do you want to show me? Like, I'm here to receive. It's kind of that reminder, and it calms everything down. And so that would be a big thing that I would want people to know if they're thinking about doing this and going forward. Just know practicing your own breath work prior. Practice it in your uncomfortable situations. If you're hungry and you feel nauseous, practice breathing through it. And you'll learn how to do it a little bit better. So when you get into a journey, you will have some body heaviness, and that appears a little different. So you and I, like the first time I had a bucket nearby, but I did learn right away that breath work really soothed that. And often it just means you're just supposed to kind of cocoon and get into your little place. You can get a little cold. So the chills, I've had it at varying degrees. The first time I needed even like a little heating pack because it didn't matter how many blankets I had. I felt like I was creating a nest, but I was really cold. Your body is integrating. These are body integrations. You can get a little heavy. That can feel a little different. So I think just knowing some of these things, be prepared. You and I, when we go in, we're usually wearing warm clothes. We've got, layers on. We're in comfortable clothes, looser fitting clothes, because you're going to have to go potty and you're going to have to move around at some point, and you don't want to have to be dealing with snaps and buttons and all the things. So loose, comfortable clothes, layer up because you're going to maybe get cold. Create a place where you can nest, have some blankets available, a little heating device if you need it. And again, have people there that can help you if you need it, because and people you trust, people you feel completely safe with, because that's going to allow you to open up. It's going to allow you to surrender. Those are my biggest things.
Absolutely. And I think, on top of that, I just want to say, nausea is common, but it can just be the body phase, right? It can feel like a little anxiety, and it's maybe not nauseousness. It is not common to throw up when you take the medicine. It's not common at all. So for what that's worth, there's a lot of people that have theories on, if you do this, you're going to get sick. And that has not been my experience. My recent journey, I was quite nauseous. I had someone say, when you're nauseous, sprawl out, throw your arms up, sprawl out. It didn't
Yeah.
feel good to me. I didn't like it. So I was actually in that kind of cocoon, and that felt most soothing. I was on my side, kind of just resting, receiving whatever guidance I needed. And that was the most comforting for me. So follow your intuition, as visuals are coming up, as things are coming up, continue to surrender. And if
Yeah.
you hear nothing else from today, let the word surrender just stick in your mind. Just surrender, surrender. I trust, because it's going to make your journey so much more gentle. Once you get, a couple hours in, you might want to go outside, when you're safe to move around. Um, if you're taking a hero's journey, a hero's dose, it might be a little while before you go outside. But it's
Mhm.
really beautiful if you can get outside, especially if it's in the evening. It's so therapeutic to be in the grass. Be somewhere safe. Don't be in the middle of a city. If you're going to hike or something, you're going to want to do a lower dose. You don't want to do a hero's dose in the woods necessarily, especially if you're new to this. Some people might, that would not be comforting to me. And after, as we said, have some food ready, have easy to make food, because that hunger might hit you hard and fast. And so even waiting 15 minutes for a pizza felt like 10 years for us. And, what I've learned is, I've done day journeys, I've done night journeys. I kind of prefer night journeys. I like to sleep after, I like to integrate while I'm resting. In the day, you feel kind of hazy. And if you got stuff going on, it just doesn't feel super great to kind of integrate. Um, but the next day, journal. So you and I integrated a lot with our conversations to each other. We've really processed what we went through, what it meant, what we took from it, but we also journaled. And so again, if you're working with a provider, they should be helping on the post integration portion. So really dive into your meditations. You're going to continue to receive guidance. Do a lot of journaling and reflecting on the process, and be prepared for your triggers to hit you in the face.
Mhm.
Every single time you do a journey and you're intending to heal something, you're going to have triggers. It's almost like the medicine saying, hey, here's another opportunity to work through this. How are you going to respond? And, it's wild what comes up. And you can choose the high road of, I'm going to look at this, I'm going to alchemize it, I'm going to allow myself to grieve it. Or you can say, no, fuck that shit. I'm pissed. This is not okay, and spiral into your circles of bullshit. You can do
Yeah.
whatever you want,
Yep.
but you're going to continue to repeat the cycles until you transcend them. As Albert Einstein says, you cannot solve a problem at the level it was created. So if you're going to use a medicine, expect to fast track your lessons. And
Yeah.
that's the one thing well, I'll say a lot of things, but that's a big thing I will tell people is if you're not in the work, you're not doing the work, this is not for you.
Mhm.
Don't This is not a get out of jail free card. This is not a I reach enlightenment by doing a few mushrooms in the woods. It's going to make you look at every shadow you have. You're
Yeah.
going to have to face it. It's just that you have a new level of awareness
Mhm.
if you receive the guidance it's giving you. So, I've seen people who just want to kind of just get through their trauma, get through it, and not have to deal with it. It's like, that's not this. And they are wondering why their tires spinning because you're not doing the fucking work. You have to sit in it. You have to be willing to be uncomfortable. You have to be willing to cry and grieve and all the things, and then look at it and say, thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you for showing me what I get to heal now.
Yep. It's kind of like playing a video game. And let's just say it's Zelda. And you're walking around Zelda world, and then you find this magic hut, and inside is this magic little chest. And you open it up and you get a tool. And that tool helps you on the next leg of your journey. That's what this is like. You're getting a tool, and that tool helps you kind of cut down the brush in this new path that you're going to go down. But it happens in these almost, it can happen in profound layers. So you might just like, whoa, I see everything very different now. I interact with things very different now. And it could be in this like micro slice of I just realize now of how I'm interpreting this. Like I have a different level of awareness. Um, in a conversation, I talk a lot about my son because him and I have these really awesome, profound conversations. And last night he had said this. So I'm not citing where it came from because he told me this, but he had said that he had, I want to say it was like UC Berkeley or something like that, had done this study on how much of our population is aware, self aware. And that's the ability to really look at ourselves and see what's happening within us because of external things. And it was like 65% of the population remains not able to do that. So if you're listening to this and if you hear it, if you know kind of a thing, congratulations because you're of the minority of the population that is able to take what we are hearing or what we are saying and hear it and say, I am able to see my own shit. And therefore, I am ready to fix it at a different level versus the level it was created. This is really intense stuff. It is not a get out of jail free card, like you said. This is not going to fix your life. Nothing's going to fix your life. You are getting a tool to navigate the next series of events, the next cycle of your life, the next season that you're going to be in. And you will be called, again, if you're listening, to do it again at a different level. Maybe with the medicine, maybe it'll be something else. That's the journey.
It is. Yeah. And, I think the one thing we didn't address that's valuable to address that I didn't know before I went down this road was, not only all the planning and this and that, there are different strains of mushrooms. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to address that because, psilocybin, that psilocybin is the strain of mushroom that is the psychedelic. Now, there are others that are not psilocybin mushrooms that are psychedelic. Okay, psilocybin is the kind of mainstream one. Within that, there's a category called cubensis. Now, that is probably the most well-known species of or strains of mushrooms, which includes like golden teacher, penis MVB positive. There's a lot of different strains within that. So those are the more mainstream. Now, within them, do your research because they all have a little bit different energy to them. And dosing can also vary because some, have a more intense potency, some don't. However, even within the same category, if we have golden teacher today and then have a different, golden teacher in a week, two different potencies potentially. So also don't assume you did a hero's dose over here and you're going to do it here. You might have a vastly different experience. because grow conditions can vary. Mushrooms are very finicky when it comes to people cultivating them themselves. What nature gives us, you can't really duplicate well. Like nature is just perfect. So when people try to grow their own, you can have a lot of variety in the different strains you have in terms of potency. So I think just be mindful too of, where you're sourcing it and being aware that you might not want to jump in the deep end like we did first off. And honestly, all of my friends thought I was crazy. People that have done this before had looked at the dose I took and thought I was nuts. I knew that was right for me. However, I wasn't trying to be a hero by just jumping into the deep end. I intuited that that's what I needed for the journey I was looking to receive. So do your research because there are thousands of different strains, right? And there's, again, what nature gave us. There's a hybridization of different ones that man has kind of manipulated and created, and they're lovely, but there's a lot of different variety. And you can get, there are companies online where you can buy microdosing capsules and different things. So if you're like, hey, I don't want to do the hero stuff yet, but I want to experience the micro, which is sub-perceptible. So ideally, microdose, you don't even feel it, but you're still getting the benefits of neuroplasticity. Um, it can be taken with lion's mane and then niacin, which is a B vitamin for really powerful neurogenesis. And
Yeah.
so people who've had strokes or who've had concussions and things can have really powerful healing through these medicines that the earth provides us. So, but again, do your research. There's a lot of information out there. Paul Stamets was a pioneer in the mushroom movement, and he has a protocol called the Stamets stack. And that also shows you how to microdose. It's not like a multivitamin you take every day. It's something that you do a few days a week, and you space it out and you do it over the course of like a 4 to 6 week rotation. So you're not taking it every single day. That's not how it's intended. So there's a lot of nuances that as you dive into this, you'll learn, or if you choose to, if you're drawn to it. And there's a lot of benefits to functional medicines too, like that's not the area that you and I necessarily research a ton of, but reishi, lion's mane, there's cordyceps, there's a lot of benefits in functional medicines as well. So, I really believe that Mother Nature gives us what we need to heal and what we need to tap into consciousness. Um, and there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah. And I think that we've stressed it a lot. We can't give you medical advice. We can't guarantee you this is the right thing for you. Do not take anything that we're saying as your new belief system or your God, or we're not doctors, but let that also tell you to not farm out your power and your own healing to anybody. Do your research. If you have to take full responsibility for yourself in that. Um, we live, and I'm going to say this, Angie, we live in a country where this is not yet legal. This is decriminalized in different places. It is not legal to grow them. It is not legal to sell them. It is not legal. And I'm going to leave it at that. And so you need to just be mindful of the choices you make. And those are your choices. And all we can do is share with you our own experience and what we've learned and what we've experienced. But I did want to just kind of put that disclaimer out there for our audience. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great, and I really do believe we are on the forefront of a massive movement. I don't think it's going to be long before there's much more mass adoption. We see systems falling left and right. It's a really cool time to be alive where, truth is reigning here and, the suppression of powerful tools,
Yeah.
like nutrition, like plant medicines, like all these other natural things we have that are so powerful are coming up. And, thank God for the internet, because if we didn't have the ability to communicate across oceans, we wouldn't be having the mass awakening we are. So, I just want to, say that I really don't think it will be long before there's a much larger movement of adoption in this. But as you said, right now, it's decriminalized in a lot of areas, meaning they're going to kind of turn a look the other way. But be smart. If you're going to pursue this, do your research.
Yeah.
Um, be intelligent with it. And again, just, take this for what it is. And if it's of value, great. And as always, whatever questions you have or topics you want us to dive deeper in on within this realm, please let us know because it's such a beautiful topic to discuss and also one that's so personal and has been so transformational for both of us. I mean, the people that you and I were even 6 months ago is nowhere near who we are today. And I credit the medicine to that. We were already on a profoundly rapid journey of healing. And it was like light speed, and I'm very blessed. I'm very grateful for the opportunity and that I got the call. So,
Same. Same. There's no regrets with that at all.
no, well, thanks you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
We'll see you guys later.
See ya.